For those of you who don't know us, I'm Walter Bringle. I deal primarily with the Focus language. I do mainframe support. So if you were running Focus on the mainframe, that goes to our team. If you do anything on WebFOCUS even that deals with the language, I might get involved with that also.
That's correct.
And then we also have Mr. Blood.
Yeah, and I am both Walter and I are now principal support engineers.
As is Mark.
As is Mark. In the new corporation and we are now a business unit, part of the cloud software group. The business unit basically is going to, interestingly enough, adopt a lot of the IBI functionality. So you will see on our presentations this morning, the IBI logo is back. In fact, if you watch, you'll start to see that the IBI website is going to come back as well.
Well, it actually is back. You can actually go to www.ibi.com.
This is all very cool. I don't think we've got a focus page out there yet, but these are all things that we're working on. We've had 2 transitions in 2 years, and they're both major. So things are still working themselves out. So bear with us.
So speaking of the IBI.com, in order to see the upcoming sessions, you can no longer go to www.tibco.com/events.
Oh, really?
You have to go to www.ibi.com/events.
Right. Okay. That's actually interesting. Okay, that's good. Good to know that. Speaking of what's coming up, just to give you just to put it on here.
Okay.
If
I'm sharing. And if you,
I am the third Walter, Mark Derwin. I am the maintain expert at Information Builders, or IBI, as we'll call ourselves again. Most of you who have ever worked with Maintain have worked with me. I'm working with some of you right now, hopefully solving any issues you may have. I'm always available to help develop, debug, and work on write-back applications. So, Mr. Blood, are you back?
I'm back. That's very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see if I can actually share anything. I blew up on the share.
Okay, then let me get going.
Ahead. Yeah.
I'm going to start today, as we always do. And today I'm going to be discussing the language wizard. Now, jokingly, I've always said, well, I'm the language wizard. But in Maintain, we have the ability to help you write commands. Now, the Maintain language is made up of about 25, 30 separate commands. And it's always been my position that it's better for you to learn how to use the commands as opposed to relying on the code to write it for you. But there will always be some cases where that's a good idea as well. So let's look into that. Okay. So this is pretty much what I just said. We'll demonstrate how to launch the language wizard and when to use it. Now, I had a treat yesterday. We actually were anyone in the New York area went to the New York office in Times Square, and I had the ability to print out my presentation, which I don't really like doing at home. So I'll move the slides forward, but I'm mostly going to App Studio. So I'm in a brand new HTML page. I'm going to create a new maintain. And I'm going to ask it to use the movies file, which with all the changes in my system, hopefully it'll still work correctly. I'm assuming you guys can see my App Studio screen.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, something just went wrong. External request, maintain data new. What's going on here? That was weird. Okay, I'm going to add a data source because most of the things we'll be using do rely on data. And to start, I'm going to infer movie code into stack. All that means is that I'm creating what we call in maintain a stack, which is a container to hold data. I'm not loading any data, but I'm creating the stack. And since I'm adding movie code into the stack, maintain knows all of the fields, all of the formats, all of the lengths, and all of the positions. So now let's right mouse click and select Language Wizard. When the Language Wizard comes up, we have these 5 options: retrieve records, update records, operate on a form, run another procedure, or operate on a stack. We're going to start with retrieve records. There are 2 easy ways to get data from the database when using maintain. One is next, which steps through the database and brings you sequential records, and the other is match, which allows you to match on a key field, and it doesn't need to be at the beginning of the database. But let's start with next. You'll notice as I move through, the command is built below. I will use the movie code. You'll notice it selected everything, but with maintain, you only need list the key. And I can either retrieve 1, n, or all records. I'm going to retrieve all. Now this checkbox is awesome. Change the current data source position before retrieving records. If we use a for all next statement to bring in all of the records from the database, and we then try to next through the database again, we will get no records. This is because the cursor is at the bottom of the table. By doing a reposition, we're always at the very top of the database. So it's a great option. We should always use it. You'll remember I created the stack STK. Where do I want to put the records? I'll put them in stack. And now I have the option of clearing the stack before we load the records. Just like reposition, this is a great idea, because if there's any data in the stack from a previous run or from a screen or from a copy, this will make sure there's no other data. I'm putting it in the stack and I'm starting in row 1. So the first record will be placed in row 1. Let's add a where clause. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep up with my slides. And I can say where category not equal, and I do have to just type in drama here. Okay, finish, and there's the code. Now, it took a lot of clicks, but it got me there. And if I was to run this and display the stack, we would absolutely see all of the records come in and be displayed. As a trick question, why might I want to start the rows in the data in row 2 of the stack? Anyone want to take a shot? Okay, I don't see any answers coming in.
Is there a header?
No, there is no header. But what if I wanted a header? I could say compute STK, dot movie code sub 1. Dot movie code equals please select. So if I was using a Dropbox, I might want that to be my first value. Okay, that's not important. So there we go. We just used the language wizard to do a retrieval. Again, we could use it for match. Let's do that real quick. So we could say match. Again, movie code from stack. And I can say into the current area. And what this will do is it'll match the value, and whatever it retrieves, it'll just put into the fields, movie code, title, category, etc. Match doesn't require a reposition. It's got its reasons for use. I usually use next more often. Okay, so let's see what else we can do. Let's create a case called include, a case called update. I'll fix that in a second. And a case delete. You'll notice I'm calling my cases delete one, update one, because I never use a keyword. Include, update, and delete are keywords. Okay, language wizard. Update records in the data source. Add, which is include. Movie code. You'll notice even though I'm selecting all of them, only the first record is put in the code. This is because for next statements, include statements, and delete statements, you only need list the key. So again, we'll use stack. We're going to include all of them, starting from row 1, and we're done. I promise you delete will be the exact same thing. And again, it saves some time if you can click through. But now the best part of using the language wizard. Update. Unlike in modify, update does not have update, maintain does not have update star. So if you have a segment with a lot of fields in it, we need to list all of those fields. So unlike the others, it's giving me every single field and it creates the code so I don't have to. Fully qualified master segment and field names. And again, I know some of you have segments that have 50, 60 fields in it. That takes care of it for you. As a side note, you only need to qualify the field name when you have the same field name in multiple records, in multiple tables, excuse me. Okay, couple last things to look at. 2 more categories real quick. We have operate on a form. We have 4 options: show a form or close a form. Well, close a form is pretty straightforward. You pick the form you're going to close, and it creates the WinForm close case. But there's actually 3 options in show. When you show a form, you can show and exit a form or show a form inactive. Show a form inactive is not available in App Studio, so obviously this shouldn't be here. But we used to do this so we could operate on the objects on the form before we displayed the form, make things visible, change their color, etc. Now we do that in a different way. WinForm show and exit is one of my favorite commands. We use this when we're doing non-persistent applications or when you want the agent to go away when you display the last form. Show and exit says, put up my form, but then the agent goes away. This is now just an HTML form with no interaction whatsoever. This is a great way to make sure your agent goes away when you're done with your application. And again, all this is doing is creating the code. I'm not going to go through the run another procedure. Run another procedure helps you build call and exec statements, but it wasn't working real great in this release. So I think at this point, it'd be better for you to write that on your own. I don't want to go through that now. So the last option is operate on a stack. And those of you who've worked with stacks know that there's quite a few things you can do with them, but this creates 3. Clear the contents of a stack, which is literally just stack clear. Let me create a second stack. Okay, so that's stack clear. We also have sort, and this I thought was really cool. We can sort the stack by movie code, by title, and I can change the direction here. High to low or low to high. And you see it goes by highest or not by highest. So I thought that was pretty cool. Stack sort, stack by highest, by other. And the final thing we're going to look at is operate on a stack, copy rows. So we can copy from stack into another stack. And we can have all kinds of where conditions too. So this helps you build the code. If I happen to feel that knowing the language is a better way to go, but for some of you, if you forget, or if you just don't want to have to write out all the fields in an update, it can be very helpful. So I always encourage developers to learn the commands, but this is a way we can generate the syntax. All right, are there any questions?
Yeah, Mark, that's interesting. It's very similar to the old table talk and modify talk functionality, which was really helpful to learn the language, not only to build stuff, but also to get to see the language because you actually see it being built.
Yes. Yeah, as I said, it's a great learning tool, but in the long haul, it's a good idea to know the code.
Absolutely.
Mark, there's a question in the chat.
Oh.
Can an MNT file be called from effects?
Yes. Now, if we're talking release, are we talking App Studio or Dev Studio? Because if we're talking MNT files, we're probably talking Dev Studio. And we can always call from effects, but it's basically an HTML procedure. Maintain files that have forms can't really be called from effects. We have to launch them with an mntcon ex procedure or mntcon run procedure. So the answer is yes, but we have to build a launcher to do it. If you need help with that, send me an email, open a case, and I'll be happy to get you a procedure that could launch the code.
WebFOCUS as a client. So normally when you're running WebFOCUS, you bring up a server, and then you have your client front end, which talks to the server. You might have App Studio talking to the server. Those are just various types of clients. But you can also use WebFOCUS as a client to another reporting server. You can use Focus on the mainframe as a client to a Windows reporting server. So what's the benefit in all this? Well, if I have data in a SQL Server and I don't have SQL Server on a mainframe, I can then access the information via the WebFOCUS reporting server on the Windows environment and have it available on the mainframe. So, and just some pictures. We have a mainframe, and we're going to talk to one or more WebFOCUS servers. The servers can talk to each other. Let's say you have a WebFOCUS reporting server on server A, and you have your SQL server on server A, but you have your main WebFOCUS server on server B. Well, you might be quicker to do all the processing on server A, so B can then be a client to server A. That way you're not getting your result set, transferring it across your network to server B. Everything gets run, processed, and then you only get the final result. take advantage. I'll just go through all these. Oop, too far. You can do some offload processing. I know we have balanced servers. So it's not really balanced because you're specifying, I want this server to do this type of work and this other server to do another other type of work. But it's a similar concept. You're distributing the work. So how do you do this? There's two files needed to set up a client on either your Focus or your WebFOCUS environment. And these two files are Odin config and edit_sprof.prf. Now these are the server components, file names. On the mainframe, it's going to be in your errors DD concatenation. From the reporting server console, if you go to workspace, they're under the configuration files. In your Odin, to set up the remote environment, we have to specify the node name, and that's going to be the shortcut, the handle that Focus or WebFOCUS then knows this particular node as. We're going to specify the class as a client, the host name. So this WB11357-W7U, that was my laptop at the time. The port, this is the port that you, if you look in your edit print, when your server comes up, it'll have your HTTP port, and then it will have your TCP port. So the port is the TCP, and the HTTP says it's the HTTP. Generally, it would be 8121 for the HTTP port and 8120 for the port. So once you defined it into the Odin config, to actually connect to it, you have to do an engine EDA, because this is an EDA connection that gives us the whole hub sub connection. So the hub being the client and the sub being the remote host, the remote server that you're going to. So we're doing engine EDA set connection attributes, and then in this case I have office, which is my node name, / and then my username, password. And that's all dependent on how you have your security set up. From the reporting server console, under adapters, you would do EDA, and then do a new connection, and then fill out the forms. So in this case, this is what it would look like. Once you have it set up, you can right-click on it and then test it to make sure that your connection and your signing in and all of that's working. Okay, communication to Office was successful. So from here, you can also create a synonym. So when you do a create synonym, it's going to go out to the files that are on the remote server and give you a list of synonyms that are out there. Just like any other create synonym, it'll allow you to filter. So in this case, I'm doing car. I want to get the car on the remote server. Okay, it was created successfully. And if you look at the master and the access file, the master is going to have suffix equals EDA, and that's your clue to say, oh, well, this is in a hub sub environment. This is going to another server to get the data. And then the access file will identify the connection that you're going to where the data resides. Instead of using the reporting server console, you could actually create the synonym if you know the app name and synonym on the remote server name, and the connection. So here's the command, create synonym. It's going to be app name / synonym. Drop says if this already exists, drop it and create a new one. For and then you have the remote name that the synonym has, the DBMS is ETA, and then at your connection. And depending on what version of mainframe focus you're on, this works nicely. Sometimes I've had issues with it, but I suggest if you do this, you're running mainframe for focus 7703 or higher, and you have apps turned on, apps enabled. All right, so you have your connection set up, you've signed in, you did your connection attributes in your ETA SPROF or in your FOCPROF. Once that's all done, you can actually run a procedure directly on the remote server. So in order to do that, you set remote desk equals, and then the connection name, where I used Office. And then I have dash remote begin and a dash remote end. Anything in between those two will get shipped to the remote server and run over there. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So in this case, if I do remote begin, question mark set print plus, remote end, I am then going to value that it has the print plus set to, because it's going to run on the server. I can run table request, table file car, sum dealer cost by country, end. So this basically just creates a report, puts it to the screen, nothing fancy about that. But what if I want to take the data and use it now locally on the client? I'm jumping ahead. Well, I can hold it. Well, if I say on table hold is hold one, where does the data get held? Well, as I said, everything in between remote begin, remote end gets run on the server. So in this case, your hold file also gets held on the server. Doesn't really do us any good, unless we want to then use that in another table request, also in the remote begin, remote end sequence. Well, that doesn't look good. So if you want to then have the data return to the client, we just need to change hold as hold one to PC hold as hold one. Now, if I'm on the mainframe and I do a PC hold, no, there's no PCs involved, except for maybe the server running on a PC. But the PC hold is the mechanism to do the transfer of the data across the wire. So when I say on table PC hold is hold one, then we're going to generate the report, we're going to create a hold file, and it's going to be sent over to the client in a file called hold one. So at that point, I can then do table file hold one and sum dealer cost by country, because now the data has transferred over locally. All right, if I have a procedure that locally on the client and I want to run that procedure on the server, I can do a remote execute fex name. Okay, the fex name is local to the calling client and it's sent to the remote server to be run. And that's all I have. So are there any questions?
Not seeing any. Any questions?
Oh, that's really neat. Thank you.
That's really neat.
Again, this you know, I'm showing it from WebFOCUS, or from Focus, but it's also, you know, WebFOCUS. So if you have multiple servers out there running, you can have one that can then have access to everything, if you have a need for that. All right, let me stop sharing.
Let me see if I can actually share this.
Yeah, because we lost your image.
Yeah, I blew up last time I tried that. Let me try and position
We'll
this.
host.
No, I didn't want to do that. 1 second.
Did you put your presentation on the share drive?
No, it's over on my system. So I have to run it from here.
If there's a problem, put it on the shared drive and I can present it and you can just talk about it then.
Okay, hold on. Let's see. All right, hold on. Okay. And
I generally start the presentation first and then share and then select where.
yeah, I lose
from
the
that list.
screen. Yeah, I lose the screen. So I'm going to share this guy. And from here, I'm going to run the slideshow and see if let's see if this gives it to me. You got that?
I
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
All right. All right. Well, it's good to be back. We were out for what, a month and a half, a month? We didn't have anything last month for you in January, and boy, we missed it. So we've got a lot planned for this year, and at the end of this, I'll throw up the list of the stuff that we're going to be trying to do. But today I want to talk about partition power. And that actually leads me in two different directions, but I'm going to concentrate today on the concept of partition within expressions. Partition is also something that's available as a thought or as an idea or as a technique. It's available at the data level. And if you're interested in that, you can take a look under in the focus world, in the WebFOCUS world, it's something that we support for the focus and XFOCUS files. And it's actually very powerful. At some point later this year, I'll talk about that. But today I want to talk about something that's available to everybody for everything, and that has to do with the partitioning that's done using expressions. All right, because partitioning in the world of expressions actually allows us to do quite a bit, and it's important to understand what's possible. The first partition function you actually ever created was last. And last has always been very useful because it created a partition that basically consisted of two records at any one time, the current record that I had and the previous record. So I had a small partition, but I had access within that partition to all the data in my current record or the data in my previous record. And that's where the partitioning eventually begins. That's where we started with it. That's always been very helpful, very useful inside of defines and expressions to be able to work with data and carry data elements forward and to be able to use them. This has been expanded quite a bit. About 7 or 8 years ago, we added the partition functions. The partition functions are functions that specifically set up partitions. And partitions in this case really are windows. They're windows in effect on the matrix. The way that Focus and WebFOCUS processes when it's doing a report basically is it does all of its selection, its sorting, and its retrieval and puts it into something that we call the internal matrix. Defines are done on this, your initial sorting is done on this, then that matrix is dumped. And in the process of dumping that, you can once again create more, you can do computes, you can do more selection, you can do more sorting, and you can also, in the process of creating the computes, you now have a very nice compact little area that you can build partitions on top of. And that's what we're doing with the partition functions here. It allows us to expand the concept of what we're doing with last very large. We can do a lot more. All right. What we can do is basically build this partition using the previous records and the subsequent records. We're not limited to the ones that we've already read. Right. We actually can talk about any record that's in that is in the matrix. We can either reference them, partition ref, partition_ref, which basically is similar to last. It's got a lot of interesting additions to it, but the idea there is it allows me to get a value, just to basically go get the value that exists in the matrix from another position. The third record back, or 3 records from now, I want you to take this field from 3 records from now, and I want you to use that in this calculation. And you can do that. In SQL, this is the lag and lead and lag functionality that's available in the analytic functions. It's the same thing. We can reference them. We can also aggregate records. We have a mechanism basically to allow you to easily roll up records and do some interesting things to the data values in the process of doing that. The partitions can be bounded, and as a matter of fact, they have to be bounded. They have to be bounded, and we can bind them. We can set up a boundary on a sort field, or we can set up the boundary on the entire table itself, which means there is no, it's the entire matrix. It's not, the boundary is not based on the sort field. And this partition, this is a reset key. This is going to actually trigger a reset. Now, we also have statistical functions which are newer than the partition functions, which use something called set partition underscore on. And this is a setting that actually controls partition boundaries that are used by these statistical functions. And the functions operate within the setting, the partition setting that you actually set. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, because there's these analytical functions, these statistical functions tend to be, they tend to work on not single records, but on groups of records. So they really have to be done in computes, and they are done, they're done on top of that computed value, or the list of computed values. So let's move along here. First off, partition underscore ref basically allows us to reference another field, reference a data value for a field someplace else in my matrix. All right, if you think about it that way. Not only can I reference the field, I can do things to that specific field in the process of referencing it, which makes it a lot more powerful than just a pure last. I can sum dot that field. I can create the average of that field. I can get the max or min, or the CNT, the count of that field, right? That's actually pretty powerful, all right? Just on that one field. So I can take the average and basically build my partition reference. The value I'm going to return is going to be an average. It's not necessarily going to be the value I have. It's going to be the average of the values that I have, right? And pardon my dog. Obviously, the target is the field that we're going to be looking at. And this is a field that's in the internal matrix. Can you guys hear that? Walter, can you hear that?
No.
Okay, good. All right. My dogs are singing downstairs, and that's because the mailman is coming, and they sing when the mailman comes, and it's enough to drive one to drink. All right. The field is the field that we have to specify is the field that we're going to basically operate on. It's the field that I want to either get the previous or next value from. It's in the internal matrix. The next key I have is my reset key. Where is the boundary of my partition? All right. At what point do I go back and start recalculating this particular function? All right. And I can set that boundary either on a buyer and a cross field, all right, which is a sort field. I can use something called preset, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Preset basically is what set partition on underscore on allows you to do. It allows you to preset a value so that you can just indicate preset here, and you'll get the value that's set in set partition on. Or you can use the entire table, in which case you get the entire matrix. The offset is basically how far back or how far forward do I want to go. So I can go get something 4 records back. I can go and get something 4 records forward. So I can reference these values if I'm assuming that I know that there's something there, or that there isn't something there. Now, there are a couple things about partition ref and the partition functions. These are functions that operate on the internal matrix. All right, so obviously they're not going to be involved. You're not going to be able to use these functions in where clauses. You can use them they will be evaluated before a where total. So, but they're going to be evaluated after a where grouped. They're done in a compute. All right, you're not going to see these. It's not going to like it if you try to do this in a define. All right, because it's not going to have the matrix to work in. The fields used in the partition ref, if they're not previously mentioned in the request itself, they will not be added to a hold file, and they will not be referenceable via column notation. So if you need either of those things, you want to bring the field that you're referencing into the hold file, you need to reference it in the request itself. Right? The values retrieved obviously are going to be dependent upon the sort sequence. So now by highest is fully supported, so you can use that. So there's no problem with that, or across highest. Across columns is supported, but by rows over and for are not supported. All right. By rows over and for are our financial modeling language, FML, or our extended matrix reporting, EMR, or whatever we want to call it. It's a financial reporting language that we have, FRO. It's a special language, and we can't use those. Partition ref is not going to function within those, within that area. All right. Simple example, retail light. I'm going to sum my cost of goods, my U.S. cost of goods, my average cost of U.S. goods, and I'm going to compute my partition. I'm going to call it the average partition AV, and I'm going to get the AVE dot of COGS underscore US. All right. Now, what this does is effectively, it's not going to get it's going to actually create the average for me. And the average is going to be based upon the partition that's defined by the next field, which is the product category. And this is the buy field. This is the highest order buy field. So we're going to be basically using that as a reset key. So I will be doing that. I will be pulling this data out and based upon that. Now I'm going to go back 2 records in order to get a reference. I want to pick out a record that's 2 records back. All right, that's what I've asked for here. And when I run this, you can see that the data values, if they exist, the last column here is the actual output of the compute. I've actually been able to pull forward something that's 2 records back. If I don't have something that's 2 records back, I don't pull anything out. It's 0, right? The other thing is if I have more than 2 records, as you see on the bottom here, I'll just continue merrily along and bring the records forward as I need to. All right, and it'll be brought forward in sequence. This can be very useful when you're working with things that have that need, for instance, time references. You can bring things forward very easily and reference things that in the past. And it's up to you to set this up. Once you set it up, it's eminently usable. All right. The flexibility here is not only that you can retrieve from previous, you can also, since you're sitting on top of that matrix, you can actually go out and say, okay, the matrix is already built, all right, for my request. I want to go and get the last value, not the previous one, but the next one, or the one that is going to be the bottom. And I want to basically doing some comparisons ultimately with that. I want to be able to display that value working with the value that I currently have, because I could ultimately set up, in effect here, I can operate on these data values subsequent to this. All right. All right. The other function we have is partition agger. Partition, and generally this was done to create rolling calculations. Basically easily. It's a little bit complicated. Yes, it is a little bit complicated, but the idea here is that this is a little bit easier to use when you get right down to it. Now, in terms of what we need to provide, you'll see that we're providing a prefix on top of a measure. It's the same idea as with partition_ref. I can operate on those values in the matrix for the measure before I actually do the aggregation here. All right. I'm going to, again, my measure, and that can be a real field or a compute. I'm then going to look for my reset key, which is going to be my boundary, and that can be my a boundary for the rolling. It can either be a by or an across field. Preset, again, that's a preset is a literal, all right, and it's used to indicate that you want to get the value from the set partition_on and use that. Or I can use the entire table by indicating table, in which case I only have one boundary, and that's at the end. Now, my rolling or my aggregation or my operation, whatever the operation is going to start. I'm going to indicate where to start it, either plus or minus rows. I can also say number of rows. I can say B for the beginning of the sort break, right? And it's going to continue to a plus or minus n number of rows from the beginning of the break, from the beginning of the partition, to the current row, or to the end of the sort break using C or E. All right, very easy. Now, the aggregation that I'm going to do, the operation I'm going to do, is indicated as the last element, and that element can be summing, averaging, max or min. I can count. I can get the first or last records. I can get my standard deviation, either based on a population or a sample for that group, for that partition. I can also get the median for the partition or the mode for the partition. All right. It just goes a little bit beyond what we have to do for the individual values that we're bringing in, but for the group of values, the operation on the group of values, I have a little bit more flexibility. And you can see that we're already jumping into the world of statistics here with the standard deviation for the population and the standard deviation for the samples. Okay. Let's see. Let's take a look. I'm going to roll up 2 months. I want and I want an average within a quarter. 2 months within a quarter. All right. So in doing this, again, I'm working on WF Retail Light, and I'm using my cost of goods for the U.S. I'm computing the average on that field. All right, and in this case, I'm not doing a prefix operator on there. All right. I'm going to take the raw values and I'm going to create the average through the operation, which is the last element in the last parameter on that list. My reset key, my break, is my time quarter. Now notice that this isn't the highest level by, this is the second level by, right? I have 3 bys here, by business region, by time quarter, and then by time month. So I'm actually going to be breaking this on my time quarter. That's my reset key. I'm going back 1 month, and there's just what I would do in order to get I'm going to average 1 month and the current month. All right, and it goes to current from -1, which is 1 record back, to my current, which is right where I am, and I'm going to create an average. All right, pretty straightforward. Think about it, and it actually works quite well. And it will average 2, and it's a rolling average. So in effect, it's going to take the current plus the previous one, average it. Go to the next record, take the current plus the previous one, and create the average. So you can build some fairly sophisticated rolling calculations here using this, and it's actually pretty simple to do it. We do all the work, which is actually kind of nice. Now, I can do the same thing, rolling monthly average effectively. And in this particular case, I'm going to change it because this is very similar, except I'm using time quarter. Again, I'm going from the beginning of my partition to the current value. and I'm creating an average, right? And when I do that, I end up with quarterly averages. Now notice this, when the quarter, I'm only involving data within the quarter. So the average for the, just take a look at this, the average on the first line is the same value as the cost of goods. The average on the second line is the average of month 1 and month 2. The average on line 3 is the average of 1, 2, and 3. All right, so you have a way of not only having even partitions here, you're actually varying the length of the actual partition, the partition within which you are doing the operation, right? Your reset key is on the quarter, so as soon as the quarter changes, we're back to square one again, and we start the operation over again. So you have, in a way, you can apply these kinds of concepts to anything that has time is a perfect thing for this. You can take a look at this kind of functionality and perform operations on quarterly data, monthly data. You can do it on weekly data if you want, and it's all done fairly straightforward using these functions. Finally, just a rolling monthly average. Again, this would be a rolling monthly average for the entire table. If you take a look at this, again, I'm using the table as my key, so I'm only going to have one break, and that's at the end. That's from the beginning to the current. So I'm going to basically having a rolling average. It's going to just a running average as we go. And this is based on, let's take a look at what we got. We've got cost of goods, and it's just going to be an average. And this is an average based on the number of records as we go. And it's a fairly straightforward, right? All right, now finally, just to give you an idea of one of the things that you can do with this, the standard deviation, both population and sample, are available in the partition as an operation. In other words, you can apply this to the data that you're pulling into this part. You're pulling from this partition. You're building a sample, in effect, with the partition. The matrix is your sample, and you can either assume that is the entire sample, in which case you're using the population, or it is not, in which case you're going to use the STDS. It's a sample. And in doing so, you can actually generate the standard deviation for that particular group, that particular population. And that's just to remind you what those are. We take a look at it, and sure enough, when we run this, we see the standard deviation for the cappuccino is different for the biscotti, which makes sense. Those were the groups, but we do have a standard deviation for those individual populations of data. So, and standard deviation is another way that we have to look at data in terms of determining central tendency. Right? Now, the statistical functions that we have done more recently are using this partition function as a base. Some of them ask you to tell us to describe it. Some of them don't. But since they are statistical and they're working with groups of data, they have to be operated on. You have to do them in a compute. So in effect, you're working with the matrix. You have the ability to partition, and you can turn that on with a partition_on. Now, there are 3 settings for this, and they are, first, which uses the first sort field in the request, and that becomes your reset key. Right, that's the highest sort. If you have acrosses will always fall below. Acrosses start out life as low-level buys. So they will never be the first unless that's all you've got. All right, in which case they will be the first. The next thing that you can use is something called penultimate. Penultimate is the next highest sort field to the values that I'm partitioning. In other words, not the sort that where my value is, it's the next highest sort. So it's like one sort above. That's the penultimate. And finally, we still have the table, which uses the entire internal matrix to calculate. Right? And these can be used with the various functions. One of the ones that, just to give you an idea, there's a new function we have called impute. Impute is an interesting little function because it helps us deal with calculating data values to replace missing data in report output, especially when you're dealing with statistics. All right. Typically in statistical operations, missing value is nice to know, but the record has to be thrown out. Right. And that's not necessarily a good thing. You don't want to do that. You want to keep as many records as possible. And one of the things you can do is you can impute a value. And there are a number of ways to do that. I mean, you can calculate it it calculates a value within a partition, and it will substitute for a missing value either the mean, the mode, the median, or a numeric constant, whatever you tell it to do. Now, obviously, you're going to want to use this with the print or the list because you want to see it. This is a detail value, all right? And it's done with a compute. All right, the matrix has to be alive and well. This is and effectively, you can see the field we're going to have is going to be a numeric field. All right, missing on the field has to have missing on, otherwise we don't know that it's a missing value. All right. We use flags now in order to determine and remember what's missing. The missing equals on is required for the field, and you can add that to define fields if you want. You can also add it to master file fields. A lot of times they're automatically added in some cases when you're building masters. If you don't have your masters or synonyms, if it's not, just go in and add it. All right. It's important that we understand that if there's a value that's missing, that is truly missing, as opposed to what we would normally do, which is assume it's either a 0 if it's numeric or a space or a dot, whatever we indicate for an alpha. Because those effectively are real data points, 0 and blank or dot. Those are real data points. Missing indicates there is no data point. And the point really here is how do I put a data point in there that makes some kind of sense, right? We do that using this impute. We can use a sort field name, a by field. We're going to build a partition. The preset, we can use preset, which is basically pick up the reset key is going to be either what's set with set partition on or table. So I have 3 options there. And I'm going to replace it with one of 3 things. All right. The numeric, some numeric constant, which I get, the mean, a mode, or a median. All right. Here's a case in which I'm going to use the first, which is the highest level sort. And I've got only one sort here. And I've got 3 different computes basically to show you what the different values are. The critical thing about impute ultimately is how accurately is it going to, what's it going to do to the data? Because ultimately you don't want it to skew the results of the statistical operation here. You want something that will fit in nicely and allow you to retain the data point, its existence, rather than having it thrown out. All right. In this particular case, if I run this, and let me back up, I went a little too quick. You'll see that I have two actual missings, and depending upon whether I use the mean, the median, the mean, or the mode, I'm going to end up with different values there. Now, ultimately, it's up to you as a designer or a developer to determine what the best would be. Or is there something else? Is there a data value that you want to use, a specific data value that you want to use to either isolate this kind of a thing? It's up to you. You have the control on that. All right. We'll take a look at the same thing. We're going to do it based on the table. And if we do it based on the table, you'll see that the data values are different. All right. And it's kind of interesting that these are the kinds of things that you have. Within the table, your entire matrix is what you're working on. Within first, your high level was done based on the store code. Right, that was your high level your first sort field. So that's ultimately where you were doing. You were treating those as your partition. In this case, with table, the entire column is your partition. Another one of our statisticals is k-means cluster, which actually it sets up a partitioning scheme for you into clusters based upon the nearest mean value of the data points. All right, and there's a number of things that have to be set. The number of clusters to extract, that's probably the most important thing. The percent, the number of iterations to go through, the tolerance, basically we default to auto, and unless you really need to get crazy, leave it at auto. You can adjust those to values if you want. The prefix dot field is the field to be clustered. And again, notice that you can actually modify the data value with a prefix operator before you actually do the clustering. Right. So in this case, you're actually able to cluster not only the data value, you can cluster its sum, its count, its average, the largest or smallest, the first or the last, right? Which is a very, very useful functionality, lots of functionality. Here's a case where I'm going to use, I've set it to do penultimate, and penultimate is the default value for partition underscore on. In this case, where is my by field? I don't have one. So what is my penultimate? It's going to be the table. And I'm doing this because I'm doing a graph. And I want one graph. I really don't care to have two graphs in this particular case. And when I generate, I get a single graph, and the clustering is based upon all of the data values. All right. Since I didn't group them and partition them based on the groups. All right. So partitioning, it's available to you with these functions. Got lots of possibilities. You can do a lot of additional calculation simply by using these functions. All right. And I think that's all I've got for you. Any questions? No questions? Here, let me
Question.
shoot.
For version 9, is there a printed book for release 9 as opposed to online?
Printed, no, as a matter of I don't believe we actually have that functionality right now. I don't think we're selling printed books anymore. That may change. We've changed companies now twice. All right.
Yes.
And we were part of TIBCO. We are now a separate business unit. When we went to TIBCO, we lost the IBI moniker. This has been resurrected in the cloud software group. In our business unit, we're going to be using IBI. The trademark is important. It's a brand that's very strong, and we're going to continue to use it. Now, will we sell books? I don't know. Good question. You can certainly, obviously, always print it out if you to get a manual.
Well, I've been collecting the manuals since day one. I'm an old Focus user from the first release, and I collect all of the manuals. I actually have one signed by Jerry, and but that's one of the reasons why. Plus, I like to be able to grab it when I'm on a plane or something like that, when you can't have access to internet or whatever. It's easier having a book and I just use the plane as a socially acceptable answer.
Well, yeah, okay, got it. I got it. I understand. I understand. Yeah. Yeah. No, unfortunately, we're not currently selling anything that I know. Now that may change. I don't know. Now this, I don't know. I mean, there's a whole piece of the company, education and documentation, that is being moved. So I'm not quite sure what's going to end up with this. It's possible. It's possible. I mean, one of the things that we were doing actually for a while was we were printing them on demand. So for version 8, if you wanted something, or even I think for the most part, we ended up doing, those are all printed on demand. We didn't send the books out to the bindery with, get the great covers and all that stuff. We stopped doing that quite a while ago. And we still did, and every time we had a summit, we had a booth. There were people that were selling, and there were lots of people buying the books. But those were all printed on demand. Now that functionality may come back, and that's certainly something we can suggest. Now, if you can see, this is what's coming up. We've got a full year planned, and the next one hopefully will go up very soon. And you'll be able to register for it. So that in March, we're going to be doing some debugging. We're going to do dialog manager dash repeat, and Mark's going to talk about Excel type applications using maintain. So there's a lot coming. The language is still alive and well, and
so are we.
Yeah, and so are we. We're not going anywhere soon. So, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Oh,
They have access to the recording of this session.
yeah, they will eventually, yes.
Eventually.
I mean, one of the we have to chase around to make sure that we actually get this, to get the videos. So we have the videos for what we've done. They're not currently available to you because we don't have a place to make them available to you yet. But as soon as we get that, they will be made available to you, and you'll be able to go out there and actually take a look at them without too much difficulty.
Yeah, next week you should get an email, just like a follow-up, and it should have a link to to review what you saw today.
Yeah, that should be there. Now, the other thing is, I think were we successful in getting the on 24 videos? We were, weren't we?
Yeah, we have all those.
Okay, so we've actually got quite a history, probably 7 or 8 years worth of Focus Fridays that will eventually be up and available to you. And there's a lot of material. There's a lot of material.
We don't have access to the recent stuff.
No, not yet.
But if you registered online, you should still be able to get those.
Yeah, that's correct.
As a stream.
Yeah, now there will eventually be some place where we will put these.
Everything.
Yeah, yeah. On the www.ibi.com doesn't currently have a focus page yet. It will have a focus page, and among other things on the focus page will be a link to a page that will list this kind of function stuff as available to you. All right, so
hopefully.
Yeah, this is all it's on. We're a lot of this we're doing as literally as we go. Literally.
For those of you who have been following us for a while, we now have another new person on the marketing side that helps us in the back end, and that is Shay Creech. So if you've been to in-person user groups,
right,
she did a lot of the coordinating of those for the southern region.
Right.
Now she is part of our business unit and will be handling not only local user groups, but also our virtual stuff.
Yeah.
So we worked with her for a while now.
For those of you who didn't know, there was actually an in-person user group in New York yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So it is our goal as a company to get in-person user groups together again. And that would be pretty awesome to see your faces not only on Zoom.
Yep. So coming to someplace near you, sometime relatively soon, we may show up. So you never know.
We can't say it's going to happen, but we keep pushing.
Yeah.
Are we going to have a summit? Are we going to have a summit?
Yeah. I mean, the good thing, and this is the good thing that we found, is that this is very much something that the new company, the new business unit is very interested in doing. So we're all behind that. Go, go, go. So hopefully Walter Brangelo or I or Mark or one of us or three of us will eventually start showing up in odd places around the country. And we'll want you to come visit us and say hello and support us. All right. Okay, I'm just glad to see all of you. I'm glad that you came, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next month. Look for there will be a note going out relatively soon about the next Focus Friday, but we are really glad to see you here.
Somebody gave us a like. I saw the like thing going up the screen.
Yay.
There's another one.
Cool.
Oh, so surveys.
Oh, yes,
We have a new
Yes.
survey.
that's right. And it's going to appear when this closes, right?
There'll be a link. As soon as we close, the final screen will have a link to the new survey. Please
Right.
take a minute and fill it out.
That's right. And I think the link will also be included in the email that goes out next week. So one way that, if you have any interest, any ideas that you want us to talk about, let us know. Notice this year we don't have a seasonal gems at the end of the year where we would normally pick up and do odd things. So if you have something you're really interested in having us talk about, let us know. Next time if we start to get some of these things, we'll ask you about it, and we'll do some kind of a poll to see if it's strong enough for us to actually bring something in and do it. So I mean, what you're looking at right now in terms of the schedule is just what we think we're going to do. So we can, since some of this stuff gets created 5 minutes before we show up, it's entirely possible for us to modify these schedules to cover stuff that's important to you. And that's ultimately what this is about.
Yeah, we want you to come back, so we want to talk about what you want to hear.
Exactly. All right. Sorry we can't give you any donuts, but that's just the way it is. All right.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
See
and
you
have a good
next
weekend.
month.